Well, continuing the conversation slash argument regarding the implications of natural selection as a fact. That's how we'll categorize it, I guess. Armando, I cannot say Armando correctly. 385821, whatever his name is. Anyway, left of center has joined the conversation, so I will play a couple of clips. He asked a couple of specific questions, and I shall answer them, and then proceed to some Matt clips, possibly.
It's your contention, Amanda, that rationality and objectivity is the highest progress, or the higher form of humanity, this capacity for abstraction. How is it that rationality developed in humans from an irrational, unintended process? How do you explain that rationality? I know it's your primary thing because...
Yeah, well, your premise is sort of off. Yeah, I claim the ends, that nature seeks, consumption, reproduction, without any other purpose, is irrational. It's not something that it doesn't satisfy any need or accomplish anything purposeful, and it's horribly risky when you inject consciousness into the equation. But nature can have logical or rational means. I'm not saying it uses necessarily rational means, but there is a logic to there's method to the madness, in the sense that it does choose reasonable or rationally efficient vehicles to accomplish what it wants to accomplish. So obviously, tools are what we are a combination of tools: eyes, ears, speed, thinking, whatever you want. You can just add up what we are, and they're tools. A liver is a tool. It's all tools to make us more efficient in playing the game, in surviving, and that's the end. But so we can be built to be very efficient in accomplishing the survival end. What I'm arguing is that the end has no innate rational purpose, but certainly the value of a reasoning mind, or a mind that can integrate with reality and understand it and manipulate it, there would be advantage for any organism to have the capacity to reason. So we are innately reasonable. There wouldn't be much purpose in having intelligence unless it gave you abilities that were very consistent with the environment you're attempting to manipulate. If it gave you false information, that would just make you act fucktarded.
You're so worried about the irrationality that's going on based on your thesis about where we came from. But since you have it, I presume you would say you have it, how did you acquire this rationality, and how do others acquire this rationality? How did humans develop the capacity of rationality from an irrational evolutionary system?
I'll add a little bit more, since the question was a little longer. Yeah, but the thing that screws up the game is that the part of us that is the subjective part, the part that is the desires, the drives that nature imposes on us, aren't necessarily consistent with that rationality. We have a scheming tool. So obviously, when it's our ends that we wish to achieve, we can be very good, very rational schemers. We can figure out plans how to fuck somebody else over to steal their stuff. We can figure out very good ways to scheme. But when it comes to philosophy, the ambition sort of changes. The desires and wills and wishes of the individual subjectively pollutes the philosophy, because there's no mission involved. You don't get a birthday cake, or you don't get a diamond ring for defining reality accurately. There's no prize for the truth. And only if you have a deep, passionate, principled attachment to that idea of the truth, that's the only thing that's going to make the truth rewarding. Otherwise, you will play with the truth. You can fuck with it, because there is no consequence to screwing around with that reality. You can fuck with the model, the philosophical model, because that can suit your ends. That can suit the ends of your desires and drives. Sorry, a little longer than I intended.
Your argument is that we should expect that an intelligent design system, I don't even like to use that word because it's so loaded, that we should see rationality and intelligence in the current state of nature, and since we don't see that, that proves the lack of existence of God. Why is that a necessary assumption and expectation for one to have?
You know, it's sort of simple. I mean, we can we can scrutinize the creation, and we can say, is it a bright or intelligent creation, or is it an inefficient, stupid, fucktarded creation? And I'm just saying, if we were evaluating it as a machine, we could look at life and we can see the pollution, we can see that it consumes too much, we can see the sloppiness of how this machine functions. The idea that you put something, as I've stated, vulnerable like consciousness, in the mix of these grinding gears and expect something good to come out at the end is would be silly. So I'm just saying, we can judge the intelligence by just judging the function of the machine. We can know that even a 5-year-old is going to be able to say, oh, it's bad for things to suffer. They can figure out that much. They really can. They don't want to see their mothers run over in the street by a car or something. I mean, and the fact that the God thing couldn't figure out that, oh yeah, let's not have conscious beings wallowing in cesspools and eating each other for 500 million years. Yeah, you have to be a fucktard to have intelligence and find purpose in that. Now, certainly you phantasmagoricals can argue that we just can't understand God's brilliant plan. But, you know, that's just the religious, that's just what they hold out there. It's like their non-definition of heaven. It's their, yes, well, we can't know until the end, and then God's going to have a big surprise for us and open the magic door. And yes, the answer will be behind curtain number 3, and it'll all make sense in the end. Well, I'm arguing that, no, we can look at it right now and say, there's no fucking way you could make sense of waste. And we can see the fucking waste in this system.
This book by Lynn Margulis, the molecular biologist, called Acquiring Genomes, A Theory of the Origin of Species. And in this book, she argues not against Darwin's theory, but she's trying to expand it to add something to it, which she calls symbiogenesis, which for her is an explanation for speciation, which is lacking in Darwin's theory, where you have...
Alright, yeah, I'm going to skip from the beginning to the end of this, because he goes into a lot of stuff about microorganisms and mitochondrial DNA and all the rest of this stuff, which I think is really pointless. You know, the idea is basically that one organism consumes another, they merge, and that through that merging we have a new species, and that might work on the microbiotic level, but it's not how the elephant was created. I mean, a giraffe didn't eat a wildebeest and create an elephant. You know, just forget that fucking shit. Look, there's nothing wrong. Darwin's explanation isn't a good enough explanation. The fact that he didn't, you know, provide every nuance or every description of... He did, in a sense. I mean, he did point out that on the Galapagos Island you have this variation take place in an isolated environment. So anytime an animal got separated from its home colony, it could evolve into something quite distinct from what it would have been if it stayed where it was, and its gene pool was larger. So small gene pools will create... more mutation will create a change in organisms. And I guess logically I could just make the example that if we cut the planet Earth in half and threw the two pieces away from each other and let things happen for 500 million years, you damn well know that the two halves were going to look very different after those 500 million years, and that the human beings probably on one planet would no longer be able to mate with the human beings on the other planet, that their chromosomes and their recessive genes and their dominant genes and all that stuff would have changed enough to make that combination no longer compatible. Let alone some physical difference that might make it impossible. So it's really not that complex a subject, and as you imply, but you don't really say, this author is just a phantasmagorical. She wants to create some sort of, you know, yes, animals are helping each other strive for, you know, greater adaptation or whatever the idea is, but it really doesn't migrate into natural selection very well, and it doesn't change it. As an augmentation, it is a minor augmentation. Well, we'll play the end.
That is existing in a vacuum and kind of neglects the interrelation between communities of organisms. And it's a good modern approach to understanding evolution that is essentially an update of evolutionary theory, because, you know, Darwin's theory is 150 years old. We've made a lot of new discoveries that don't contradict Darwin, but add to the picture in significant ways. So check out this book. It's excellent.
Yeah, well, you say insignificant ways. Now that's the dangerous rhetoric, in my opinion. It's not insignificant ways. It's in tiny little, almost minutiae ways that are irrelevant to the real concept, which is that nature does the selection. The environment selects. through competition, through organisms competing with each other, ripping each other to pieces for their success. That's the reality, and it does nothing to change that reality. As for colonies and societies, and your I don't know, what your approach that somehow the cells have something to do with the whole and all this other stuff. Now, my liver cells are free agents. They don't give a fuck about me, and they only behave consistent with my welfare because that's how they've been rationally programmed to behave. It's in their frickin' personal interest to behave in the interest of the organism that's providing for their existence. And that's the extent of these relationships. And our social relationships, our families and our tribes are built out of the same kind of, it becomes our self-interest to do certain things, and that's part of the programming. It is not something we're not built to be altruistic for that principle of altruism. We are built to do things in a common good because it becomes our good. It is in the interest of our DNA. It is in the interest of that DNA molecule's progression to the future. That's why it happens. It's because it's in that interest and none other. And there's nothing in your stupid book that changes that fact.